Yes, all the commissioners are here. I'm just finishing up the technical stuff and you'll see the blue screen go away here shortly.
Got it.
And I'm sorry, I was putting a space in my name and I think I knocked off the scan label someone had made for me. Sorry.
Welcome, everybody. I'll call to order our meeting of March 15th, 2022 for the Salem Planning Commission. Shelby, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine?
Here.
Commissioner Ickes?
Here.
Commissioner Vaught?
Present.
Commissioner Goebel?
Here.
Commissioner Griggs?
Here.
Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Kopcho is absent. Commissioner Levin?
Here.
And Commissioner Slater?
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. Thank you, Shelby. And welcome Commissioner Goebel's helper to the meeting. Public comment. We don't have anybody signed up for this section in public comment. The consent calendar. I'm looking to you, Commissioner Slater, for a motion.
Yes, before I do that, I'd like to ask Commissioner Levine if he wanted his comments from the last meeting entered into the minutes, or if he was satisfied with the just entering it into our speaking it at the last meeting.
No, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Then I have reviewed the minutes for March 1st, and I'm pleased to go ahead and make a motion to adopt those.
Great. So I need a second for that motion. Some reason I'm
Second by Levin.
Thank you so much for telling me, because it's hard to see the way this screen is right now. So we've got a motion and a second by Levin. Discussion on the motion. Any corrections, any comment? I'm not seeing any. Shelby, would you please call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Ickes?
Aye.
Commissioner Vaught?
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Thank you, Shelby. Motion passed. We have that was the consent calendar. Moving on to public hearings. Are there any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest to declare amongst the commissioners? Let's see. So we will now open a public hearing on case number CA 21-04, our Salem Code Amendment. Shelby, would you please read the statement of criteria?
This is a public hearing to consider a code amendment case number CA 21-04 for proposed amendments to the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan, Comprehensive Plan Map, Neighborhood Plan Maps, Zoning Map, and Salem Revised Code, and for the adoption of the Salem Housing Needs Analysis. The criteria applicable to this case are found in Salem Revised Code, SRC, chapters 110.085B for amendments to the Unified Development Code, UDC, 265.010D for legislative zone changes, 64.025E for plan map amendments, and 64.020F for comprehensive plan amendments. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Ms. Kim, you're on. Do you want to give us a presentation?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Eunice Kim, Long Range Planning Manager for the City of Salem, here to present the staff report for the Rcl Project. There are a lot of other staff here with me tonight. Just want to take a moment to acknowledge them. Austin Ross, Bryce Bishop, Patricia Farrell, Julie Warnicki, Tor Banter, and of course, Lisa Anderson. So tonight we're here to present again the staff report for the Salem project. The Salem project is a multi-year project to update our comprehensive plan. This is the high-level goals, policies, and maps that guide how we grow and develop in the future. This project stems from the 2017 strategic plan, when we heard from the community that they really wanted to develop a vision for how we grow and develop in the future. So we have been working with the community since 2018 to do just that. We've done a lot of outreach over the last 3+ years, working with hundreds, thousands of people across the community. We have done outreach and engagement both in person and in this virtual world. And we have tried to ensure that we are hearing from the perspectives from across the community. We know we can't reach every single person in the Salem area, but we're trying to make sure that we are at least hearing the different perspectives. We've made intentional efforts to reach out and engage folks that we traditionally have not engaged in our planning projects in the past. We have used all of that outreach throughout the community to bring you tonight's proposal for the Salem project. The proposal includes several components. It includes an update to the comprehensive plan itself, which includes goals and policies. It includes proposed changes to the comprehensive plan map and the zoning map, and includes proposed changes to the code, so code amendment. We are also proposing to adopt the housing needs analysis, which was completed at the end of 2014, early 2015. And we are able to do that because of our proposed changes to the map allow us to meet our housing needs projected in the future. The results that we're presenting tonight address a wide range of community priorities, from our housing needs, which I would say is one of the top priorities we've heard throughout our outreach, as well as our goal from the community and the council to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, as well as promoting equity, which has become more in the forefront of our work in the last few years. I'm going to start with the draft comprehensive plan. There's quite a few topics that it touches on, everything from housing, transportation, economic development, parks and recreation, climate change. I'm not going to walk through all of the goals and policies, but I will highlight a few of the chapters and a few of the policies. We have a variety of goals and policies around community engagement and equity. Throughout our work, we have heard from the community they want to ensure that we are embedding equity in both how we do our work and how we outreach to the community, as well as in the results of our work. So you'll see policies, for example, here that talk about expanding opportunities for underrepresented groups to participate in the work that we do as a city, and ensuring that the results of that work both benefit and don't disproportionately negatively impact underrepresented groups. There's equity also throughout the plan, but these are just some of the highlights. We also have many goals and policies around housing. As you're all aware, housing again is a major priority of this community. So we have goals and policies, for example, around making sure that we have a diversity of housing types, particularly in new developments, making sure that we disperse our affordable housing and our multifamily housing across the community and not just concentrating it in one. Making sure that we have a whole continuum of housing, from shelter, transitional housing, supportive housing, multifamily housing, single-family housing. And then also to locate our high-density housing near the core network. So the core network is Chariot's network of frequent routes that Chariot is really dedicated to maintaining and increasing service on. So you'll see throughout this project that we're doing a lot of coordination with the core network and how we're planning to grow in the future. You'll also see a lot of these ideas and these policies reflected in the map changes that I'll talk about later. We also have a variety of goals and policies around economic development. We have a lot of small businesses here in Salem, and so one of the priorities is to facilitate their growth and stability. We know that we have a need to ensure that we still have land for industrial growth going forward, and that we maintain that long-term supply. Another priority we've heard from the community is making sure that as development occurs, it is pedestrian friendly, and you'll see that again reflected in our work in the code. And last but not least, there's a proposed policy around neighborhood hubs, which I'll talk about later. A new chapter that we have in the proposed comprehensive plan focuses on climate change and natural hazards. Climate change has come to the forefront of a lot of the work that we've done as a city and in the community. And so you'll see proposed policies around reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing awareness in the community around the risks and what we can do to really prepare for natural hazards, and then making sure that we really build a resilient community. A lot of this work was done in collaboration with the Climate Action Plan that was accepted last month. And so we worked with staff and that plan to roll up those strategies from that plan into higher level goals and policies. So again, a lot of these goals and policies are reflected in the proposed map changes before you tonight. The comprehensive plan map, just as a reminder, is the high level map that shows where the community wants to see different types of uses and development in the future. So where does the community want to see multifamily housing versus commercial land versus industrial land? It is implemented on the more detailed zoning map. So we are also proposing changes to the zoning map that align and implement that higher level comprehensive plan map. So the zoning map again is more detailed. Instead of just saying commercial, it'll say commercial office, commercial retail, commercial general. So the changes that you see in the comprehensive plan map and they're proposed for the zoning map, again, really map out the priorities in the community and advance the goals and policies that you see in the draft comprehensive plan changes themselves. I'm going to walk through several highlights So one of, again, the priorities of this community again is making sure we have enough land for housing. We know we need more multifamily housing based on our housing needs analysis, and just every day we're hearing concerns around needing more housing and needing more multifamily housing. As we've done our outreach, we have heard that folks want to see, again, new multifamily housing distributed across the community. This map shows where our existing comprehensive plan, multifamily comprehensive plan designations are, and you'll see them kind of throughout the community. And then this next map shows where we're proposing to add multifamily land. We're proposing to add over 300 acres of land, again, distributed across the community. And with these proposed changes before you tonight, we're projected to meet our need for multifamily housing, which again allows us to adopt the housing needs analysis. This map shows where our existing mixed use land is in the same area. When we talk about mixed use in Salem, we're really talking about flexibility in uses. Our mixed use zones don't mandate that you do a mixed use development, your traditional kind of what you see downtown where there's retail on the bottom floor and housing above. Our mixed use land is really about allowing housing, allowing commercial, retail, office, or a combination. So again, it's really about flexibility. We're proposing to add a lot of mixed use land, over 1,500 acres as part of this project. You'll see that outlined in the pink here on the map. Most of our mixed use land that we're adding is along Chariot's core network. Again, this aligns with the work that's been done in the Climate Action Plan and the goals and policies in the proposed update to the comprehensive plan. We're trying to encourage housing and mixed use development that's located near transit. So you can see this kind of blue line that's on the major corridors on commercial and on Lancaster. That is a quarter-mile buffer in the core network. Another priority that came out of this work is the establishment of neighborhood hubs. A neighborhood hub would be a new zone that's established as part of this project that allows but does not require small-scale businesses in residential areas. You can think of like a barber or a bookshop. The idea is to allow these small-scale businesses so that people can more easily access and walk to their daily needs. Single-family homes would still be allowed in the neighborhood hubs, but new businesses, smaller businesses will be allowed. Again, the idea is to promote complete neighborhoods to allow walkability. One of the other things you'll see in the proposed map changes is kind of one-off changes kind of across the map. And what we're trying to do is resolve conflicts between the comprehensive plan map and the implementing zoning map. In a lot of cases, there are disconnects or they don't align today, which really causes issues for people who are trying to develop their property when there's a conflict. So for example, if there's a property that's zoned like multifamily, but it's designated on the comprehensive plan map as industrial, that's considered a conflict. So what we did as part of this project is resolve those conflicts, making the appropriate change to either map. So if there's multifamily, for example, on the ground today, and the comp plan map said industrial, but the zoning was multifamily, we changed the comprehensive plan map to multifamily. So we're trying to make it simpler for folks to develop their properties without this mismatch. We also did a transportation analysis to really understand the impacts of the proposed changes on the transportation system. And so what we did is we worked with the Council of Governments to project out traffic volumes to 2035. So the transportation analysis looks at future growth under today's comprehensive plan map and zoning map, and then the proposed changes in the comprehensive plan and zoning map. And it compares those future scenarios. What it found is there's minimal differences between the impacts of those two, and that we actually meet the requirements of the state transportation planning rule. We coordinated this analysis with ODOT and shared the results with them, and they have submitted an email confirming that. The other major component of this project is our proposed code amendment. So we're proposing several new zones, and we're proposing to make changes that really implement the recommendations of the zoning subcommittee. That subcommittee included 4 city councilors and 4 planning commissioners that was really focused on making changes to the code that would help us reduce greenhouse gas emissions, particularly from transportation, which is the biggest contributor to our greenhouse gas emissions in the Salem area. Well, I will talk about that. So again, the neighborhood zone is, our neighborhood hub zone is one of the new zones we're proposing. It allows kind of a range of uses that would serve a neighborhood, whether it's retail sales, personal services, daycare, for example. But we also heard in our outreach that there were uses that neighborhoods did not want in their neighborhoods. And so we're prohibiting a list of uses like nightclubs, tattoo parlors, banks, tobacco shops. We're also proposing standards in that neighborhood hub zone to help make the neighborhood hub more compatible with established neighborhoods. So for example, there's hours of operations that are limited in the neighborhood hub zone for those businesses. And there's like required screening. So if you have a business and it's next to a residential zone, then there would be a 6-foot tall wall or fence. Again, throughout our outreach, we heard that there's support for neighborhood hubs, but people really wanted to make sure that they were compatible with the neighborhood. Another zone that we're proposing is the mixed use 3 zone. Again, this would be a flexible zone that allows a broad range of uses, housing, retail, office, and others. It's largely located along the core network and is similar to the commercial retail zone. The commercial retail zone is largely along the core network today, and so we're proposing to rezone it to this new mixed-use 3 zone. The idea is that we would make it easier to do multifamily housing, so that would be an allowed use outright, as opposed to today, where you have to get a conditional use permit. And we're also trying to kind of balance the uses that are allowed today and making development, as development and redevelopment occurs, more pedestrian friendly. So we've introduced some simple design standards to make sure that development, again, as it occurs, is more friendly, so that there's new parking lots, for example, would be to the side or rear of buildings, but existing parking lots can remain as they are. New building entrances would face the street, for example, again, to make them more pedestrian. Another new zone that we're proposing is a mixed-use riverfront zone. This would be north of downtown. This work actually stems from work that urban development started several years ago and looked at consolidating all of the different overlays that are up in the north downtown area to simplify the zoning code. And so this mixed use zone would again allow a mix of uses, multifamily housing, retail, etc. But it would also allow some small scale manufacturing and warehousing, understanding that a lot of buildings that are there today are industrial building. So as they transition, we heard that there's a desire to allow craft industrial, for example. In addition, that zone, like the mixed use 1 and 2 zones, is really meant to encourage pedestrian friendly development. This one, this zone is different from the mixed use 1 and 2 zone in that it promotes access to the river. So again, the zoning subcommittee recommended some changes to the zoning code around height, density, parking, middle housing, all really to aim towards promoting more housing and more mixed-use development near transit and services so that we can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We have a goal in the comprehensive plan proposed update to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet council's goal of carbon neutral by 2050, but we know it's not enough just to have a goal and policy. And so this committee really looked at what are the things we can do in the zoning code now that would help actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This work was very much in line with the recommendations in the climate action plan. Again, that was accepted by council last month. So after our Salem is complete, we know there's a lot more work to be done. So this is just, even though it's a long project, a first step, and a lot of additional work would have to continue to start implementing even more. So that would include an update to the transportation system plan, the park system master plan, doing work on housing production strategy, economic opportunities analysis, the goal 5 inventory, and then continuing to work on climate action plan strategies. So again, this is the first step. It's the high level goals and policies that will continue, and we will hopefully continue implementing after that. So that concludes the staff presentation. We are recommending that the Planning Commission recommend that Council accept first reading of the ordinance bills to update comprehensive plan housing needs analysis and amend the maps and the zoning code. Thank you.
Thanks, Eunice. Questions from planning commissioners for Ms. Kim? You can raise your hand or use your little, okie dokie. Commissioner Ekus. You're muted, Commissioner Ekus.
Kim, you mentioned the neighborhood hubs, and I read something where there was a proposal that for large new developments would be required to set aside. Is that still part of it? You didn't mention that. That's the only reason I asked.
Yes, that is one of the zoning subcommittee's recommendations that we're proposing. So in a large subdivision, they would have to allow a neighborhood hub use. They wouldn't have to actually establish it, but they would have to allow.
Okay. Another question, if I could. It seems in here there's sort of some assumptions based upon flexibility. Because for reasons I think I understand, we don't necessarily want to require something, but we want to allow it. And I guess what I'd like to do is get a better sense of why or how you think the flexibility into the mixed use would actually end up producing the kinds of mixed use we really want, as opposed to just a continuation of the current pattern, which would be allowed. That we're just providing flexibility, and we're kind of assuming that that flexibility means there'll be a change in the current pattern of development. And I'm wondering what the basis of that hope is. I mean, has that proved to be the case in other areas where this has happened? Have you got indications in your planning department that would result in more mixed use?
Sure, I appreciate that question. So one of the things that the zoning subcommittee did was to look at specific incentives so that there would be encouragement for housing and mixed use development along that corridor. And so along the core network. So for example, one of the recommendations of the zoning subcommittee that we're proposing is to reduce parking requirements for housing that's in the mixed use zones near the core network. So essentially what would be allowed is today, if you have a commercial property, which there's a lot of commercial properties with parking lots along Commercial Street, for example, they all have a parking requirement. But under the zoning subcommittee's recommendation, if they wanted to add housing to those sites to create true mixed use and to just add housing, that they would no longer have any parking requirement for that housing, as well as for the existing commercial uses. So that frees up that land, that parking lot, for example, for housing. So we're trying to incentivize it in different ways as opposed to mandating it.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Ekus?
Well, I was just wondering if you have any experience, if you've got any background on experiences other cities have had in trying to do this and whether it's had the intended effect.
Some cities actually mandate having ground floor commercial, for example, with housing above, or they only allow housing in mixed use. We've really tried to stay away from that. All of our outreach, all the input we've heard is that folks don't really want that mandate. And so again, we've tried to incentivize. The mixed use zones that we have currently are fairly new. And so it's hard to say exactly how it will bear out, but these incentives would also be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Fott.
Thank you. Eunice, can you talk a little bit about what policies are being recommended in order to preserve natural spaces and if we're adding or losing parkland?
Sure. We have a variety of policies that are really looking at promoting open space, whether it's in developments or natural resources across the community, equitable access to open space. And so we have a lot of policies around that in the draft comprehensive plan. And we are proposing not to add parkland, but to add land that's designated for parks, open space, and recreation. So today, about 10% of our land is designated POS, parks, open space, recreation, and we're intending to add roughly 600 acres to that. Some of that is existing parks, and some of that is along our riparian corridor, wetlands mitigation, et cetera. We're also looking to incentivize open space. So through our zoning subcommittee recommendations. So one of the recommendations is to increase density, or rather establish a minimum density in our subdivisions, our larger subdivisions. And part of that work is to exempt open space. So if you set aside in a subdivision open space, it doesn't count against you to meet your density requirement. So there are different ways that we're trying to do that. In addition, after our Salem, the Parks Master Plan will actually look at identifying land in terms of where do we need more parkland going forward.
Thank you.
You bet. Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Slater? Are you good for right now?
Surprisingly, I don't.
Well, there you go. Commissioner Fogg, you're up.
Thank you. I just had a question regarding the parking in mixed use 3. And I completely appreciate that we're trying to incentivize reducing that parking to incentivize additional housing, which is fantastic. So what I would like to know is there a maximum amount of parking that will be allowed so that we can avoid heat island effects and large vacant spaces along street frontages?
Yes, we have maximum parking requirements today, and those would continue.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Commissioner Goebel.
Thank you. I'm not seeing the option to raise my hand, so.
That's okay. I saw your real hand, so that's good.
Yeah, so my question is a little bit piggybacking on what Commissioner Ickes had said is, I guess one of the concerns that crossed my mind, and while I really love the idea of incentivizing commercial businesses to establish more multifamily housing, my concern is what's, I guess, stopping multifamily developers from basically, for example, say if I put in one office or one small commercial element into my multifamily, housing development, do I just get out of all of the multifamily design standards, parking standards, landscaping standards, all the things that we right now require for multifamily housing development? If I have a mixed use element in my apartment complex, does that get me out of multifamily housing standards?
Sure. So today, along that core network in that same quarter-mile buffer, multifamily housing already does not have a parking requirement. So that's something that was established, I think, a year or two ago, perhaps. But when it comes to the development or the design standards that are in for multifamily development, we have a very specific definition of mixed-use development, in which case you can then be exempted from that. And that really is like a 2-story building, ground floor commercial uses, residential above. And so if you do a true mixed-use building, you get out of certain design standards, otherwise you don't.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Goebel?
Thank you, that was really helpful.
Okay. Other questions? I had one question, and I know it came up in a conversation somewhere with you, Eunice, and that was the mixed-use riverfront proposed new zone. And the way it was worded, or is worded, I think, is that if an apartment complex wanted, multifamily complex wanted to go in on Front Street, the way it's worded, the parking would have to be at the back along the river, which is really kind of the view that most apartment dwellers would like to see, rather than the railroad track on Front Street. Did we put in any language to give that flexibility?
We did, based on conversations with property owners in the chamber and others. We created flexibility to create kind of a 50%. So you could have parking along the street along 50% of your frontage, as long as you screened it. And so we tried to find a balance there, so it's not all the parking's on one side, understanding that people want to have views of the river.
Got it. Commissioner Ekus.
One moment. Thank you. I have a series of questions on the affordability issue. I know there is a definition of affordability, and we're relying a lot on incentives to encourage affordability of housing, and we have zoned, or the proposal tries to increase it. We've already got it zoned and tries to increase more multifamily, so that's throughout the city. But the size, the amount of affordable housing that we need is pretty significant. So what I'm wondering is if, you know, how are we tracking this? And how are we tracking whether or not we're getting what we need? How are we tracking whether or not the incentives work? Are we in a position where if there's large developments but they do not include affordable housing, what are our options? Is it possible we can deny it? Or are we stuck saying, okay, the incentives didn't work, you haven't included it, but we're not requiring it, so go ahead?
Yes, I think you're correct in that we have a lot of incentives for affordable housing, whether it's no SDCs for affordable housing, less parking requirements, et cetera. But we don't have a mandate that certain projects of a certain size need to include affordable units. There was a state law passed several years ago that would allow cities to require larger developments. So I think it's buildings that have at least 20 units. We could require that a certain percentage be affordable. That's not an issue that the city has taken up yet. And so it could be an option in the future. But again, mostly again, we're relying on incentives. We do track affordable housing every year. The state actually requires us to report how many units we've created multifamily, how many were affordable. And a lot of that work we do in collaboration with urban development that has the funding to provide or promote affordable housing. So we do track it. Also, in addition to the housing needs analysis, that does outline a big need for affordable housing. If we adopt the housing needs analysis as part of this project, the next step would be to do a housing production strategy. That actually looks at what's being built on the ground and what can we do, what other incentives, whether it's funding or more changes, can we make to actually ensure that type of housing is developed, and not just code. So looking again at tax incentives, et cetera. So that would be a next step.
Follow up, if I could?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
sorry.
I've seen in comments, and I haven't got a handle on how much of the single residential we are changing to multifamily. But so my question is really, are any changes made if we change the single family to multi-housing? What about the developing residential? Are any of the developing residential zones being changed to multi-housing, multi-family?
Yes, a lot of the land that we're proposing to change to multifamily is either single family or developing residential.
Okay, so DRs are actually being changed to multifamily as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Levin.
Thank you, President Griggs. I've been involved in this project since it began on the private side as a business owner and landowner in Salem, and then also as a part of the Planning Commission and the Subcommittee. And Eunice, you've done a phenomenal job spearheading this project and being the point person The professionalism, the all-encompassing approach, the volume of public outreach that was done was really, really phenomenal. I think what has been crafted is a very reasonable and very well thought out and designed plan for the comprehensive plan, as well as the zone map revisions that have been provided. So I applaud all the work that staff has done, you especially being the person who has had to attend the most events and public facing, and receive a barrage of questions from people who are not up to speed on the past work that was done or reviewed or compared past zone maps to current zone maps and whatnot, to really understand whether the changes are significant or not. But well handled. So a question that came up as I'm sitting here, and this feels to me, being involved for this long, this feels like a small baby step to finally move the last piece to forward this on to City Council. And as I'm thinking about it, we did a really good job with the UDC, the Unified Development Code update, for those that aren't familiar with that acronym that's thrown around a lot. But it wasn't perfect, and there were some changes that had to be made. Typically, a comp plan rewrite is a very rigid document, and I'm wondering on a structural level of the document itself, is this at all modernized that would allow some kind of modification in between what is normally like the 40-year period before a rewrite happens, for like adjustments, I guess? I'm not sure. That's the base of my question.
Sure. So you're correct in that this type of overhaul update to a comprehensive plan does not happen very often. But we do make updates to policies as needed. And so, for example, in 2015, when we adopted the most recent economic opportunities analysis, that came along with some policy updates around employment, economic development. So those kind of changes to portions of the policy plan have happened and can happen going forward. It's just this kind of large scale holistic look at it that is more of a rare event.
Do you have a follow-up, Commissioner Levin? Does that?
No follow-up.
Okay. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. So Eunice, one of the things that I'm concerned about with this plan is that, as I understand it, it relies a lot on our ability to bring people out of their cars and onto the streets, or their willingness to live in multifamily or in more dense neighborhoods. And so what I'm concerned about is that our current street environment does not necessarily support that kind of development. Some of our, if you look at Commercial Street, you look at Lancaster Street, you look at some of the streets where we're proposing kind of live-work situations, those are not the most appealing places for people to walk or stroll along. What is the city's strategy to make those more appealing spaces? How do we, I guess my long-term concern is we might wind up with the worst of both worlds. We have lots of constructed density, but then we don't have kind of the flip side of it, which are kind of better streets and roads.
Sure. I think that one of the things that we're very cognizant of that, and what we're trying to do is have the land uses and the transportation system be aligned. And so one of the things that we're eager to do after Salem is to update the transportation system plan and really look at how can we make improvements to what streets, is it new designs, et cetera, to complement the work that we're doing at Salem. I think the other thing beyond just updating the transportation system plan, it has a lot to do with funding. What are our funding priorities as a community in terms of infrastructure improvements? And I think this project and then the update to the transportation system plan will help push those along so that our funding hopefully aligns with the priorities.
Did you have a follow-up?
I do. So in the transportation plan, then, will that include, for example, new cross sections, or will it identify roads that we are going to rehabilitate or improve? Will it be that level of specificity?
I would like to say yes, but I'm going to defer to Julie Warnicki, who will lead
Hey,
that
Julie.
effort.
I just wanted to hear from Julie. That's why I asked that second question.
Hi, I'm Julie Warnicki, Transportation Planning Manager with the Public Works Department. And yes, the plan will, what's the right word? The plan is going to look at what are changes that we want to make to our transportation network going forward to support these land uses as well as, our other existing land uses. And I believe there will be a focus on multimodal improvements and different cross sections. What level of detail the transportation system plan gets into is something that we will have to see as we go along. I can envision that it could easily end up with changes to our typical cross sections that would then lead to changes to our street design standards. That is going to be a process that will have to take some steps. It will also likely lead to changes to our potentially some code requirements relating to streets. So once again reflecting a different cross section. We are currently pursuing projects to support better pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. For example, you mentioned Commercial Street. We are have funding and are moving forward with installing buffered bike lanes on a section of Commercial Street in the next couple of years. And as Eunice mentioned, funding is definitely an issue, and the transportation system plan will give us the opportunity to look at the suite of needs and sort of, where are our community priorities to support the Salem process.
Follow-up, Commissioner Slater?
Just a final follow-up.
Okay.
So Julie, do you anticipate that kind of improved standards or requirements for street trees and vegetation and similar amenities might then be included into some of the design standards, especially for our larger streets?
I believe that will definitely be a topic of discussion, and I'm guessing that we will hear input. I can't promise what the end result will be, but I believe that will be part of the dialogue and the trade-offs, and one of the goals to do things like address urban heat issues and create a more livable, friendlier feeling for people who are living and working and traveling on these higher level corridors.
Yeah. Great. Well,
My guess is
lobby.
My guess is you would be a logical addition to that committee when that is assigned. Yeah. Other questions of Eunice or staff in general? Commissioner Ickes.
Thank you. Thank you. This hasn't come up before, but one of the things in the climate action plan is a lot of reference to the potential for solar. And I'm wondering to what extent the issue of solar energy came up in issues of design or orientation of new developments. Because there's a lot of developments that have been in the past oriented in a way that reduces it, if not prevents, the actual effective use of solar energy. So I'm wondering if there was any consideration of or if that's something for the future to discuss at some other point, the implications for development design for future solar power.
Sure. We do have policies around green building and green design, and which include, kind of solar ready design. But I think that the detailed work in terms of what that looks like, what a requirement would be or an incentive would likely happen with the climate action plan task force that's been formed, as they're going to kind of deep dive into all of those policy issues. If it turns out that task force recommends a code change, that would be something that we would implement.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Other questions of staff before we go to the neighborhood associations? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll move on to the neighborhood associations. Each of you would have 10 minutes and name and address for the record, and we'll start with Roz or Lori, but I saw Roz signed up, so I'm wondering if that will be you. Hey, Roz, how you doing?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, President Griggs. I'm Roz Sherrick. I live at 1645 Church Street Southeast. And of course, I'm representing SCAN here tonight. We also provided written comments, which should be in your packet. But this evening, I'd like to focus on SCAN's request that mixed-use 2 zone be used on Commercial Street Southeast from Mission Street to Vista Avenue South. And those are roughly our north and south boundaries for SCAN. But instead, the proposed zone map shows the mixed-use 1 zone along Commercial Street from Mission to Myers, and you can see that on map 119 in attachment 19 of the staff report. And I'll be referring to several maps from in that attachment 19. The mix, and then again, the proposed zone map then shows mixed-use 2 zone being applied to Myers to Superior Street, and you can see that on map 122. And then the mixed-use 3 zone is applied to Superior to Vista Avenue, and that's on map 124, again in that attachment 19. But SCAN believes the mixed-use 2 zone is most appropriate for that entire section from Mission Street to Vista Avenue. On the west side of Commercial Street, many of the lots that front commercial are about 8,000 square feet, relatively small for commercial and multifamily uses. A narrow alley runs parallel to Commercial Street from Bush to Rural Avenue and provides access to those lots. The mixed-use zone on that narrow strip would abut existing single-family zone properties and multifamily zone properties, most of which are actually still in single-family use. The east side of Commercial Street has similar small lots and an alley that runs from Mission Street to Superior Street. The mixed-use zone would abut existing commercial office zone properties that also use that alley for access. However, south of Superior Street, the mixed-use zone would directly abut the single-family zone. Mixed uses would need to use the same 2 alleys for access as the current small businesses and residents do now. Commercial Street is only 2 lanes wide, except it is 3 lanes for the first 3 blocks from Mission to Owens, and it has no room for bike lanes and limited curb parking for most of the blocks between Mission and Rural. Therefore, the mixed-use 2 zone is the most appropriate for this section of Commercial Street due to the small lots, adjacent residential uses, and limited street alley capacity. We strongly oppose the mixed-use 3 zone that's proposed on Commercial Street from Superior Street to Vista Avenue. And again, you can see this on map 124. The lots along Commercial Street, of course, which are on the Chariot's core network, are a good location for pedestrian-friendly commercial and residential uses that rely on transit. But the mixed-use 3 zone wastes this potential because it includes a number of vehicle-related uses that do not need to be located on the core network. And also the mixed-use 3 zone allows too intensive development for the small lots and abutting residential uses. Vehicle-related uses that are allowed in the mixed-use 3 zone that are not allowed in the mixed-use 2 zone include like motor vehicle and manufactured dwelling and trailer cells, motor vehicle services, including gas stations, commercial standalone surface parking lots, drive-throughs, truck rental and leasing, privately owned campgrounds and RV parks, to name a few. And then there's other types of uses in the mixed-use 3 zone that are not allowed in the mixed-use 2 and not appropriate for this section of Commercial Street. And those include long-term commercial lodging, funeral and cremation services, landscape, lawn, gardening, and tree services, and general manufacturing, to name a few. So would the mixed use 2 zone on Commercial Street from Mission to Vista, if we were to apply only the mixed use 2 zone on that section, would that prevent the city from meeting its multifamily and commercial needs? No. The city has provided no information that lining the core network with 5- and 6-story buildings full of commercial and/or multifamily uses are actually required to meet its projected need for more multifamily and commercial uses. There is no information about why the proposed allocation of the mixed use 1, mixed use 2, and mixed use 3 zones is required to meet those needs. And nothing suggests that using mixed use 2 on that section of Commercial Street will prevent the city from meeting its multifamily and commercial needs. SCAN believes the mixed use 2 zone on this section of commercial will allow significant progress towards meeting the city's goals and the economic opportunities analysis and the housing needs analysis. SCAN does not oppose the widespread use of mixed use zones, but the choice of which mixed use zone is applied to a given location needs to consider the surrounding uses and the capacity of the street system that will carry not only buses, but also increased traffic generated by the mixed uses. So that's basically what we're requesting: mixed use 2 zone on Commercial Street Southeast from Mission to Vista. And now in our written testimony, SCAN has also offered some feedback on some of the zoning subcommittee recommendations. So I'll just briefly mention, we do support increasing dwelling units per acre to 15 in each of the mixed use zones. We support a minimum units per acre for new subdivisions of at least 5 acres, but a higher minimum is needed than the proposed 5.5 units. Otherwise, an opportunity is lost to achieve more single family and middle housing in the few remaining areas available for large subdivisions. And we also support requiring at least 15% of units be middle housing. We oppose a minimum 15 units per acre in the single family zone on existing vacant lots within a quarter mile of the core network. This appears to prevent someone from building their own single house on their vacant lot. It is not clear if the minimum density requirement allows existing development standards, such as setbacks and maximum lot coverage, to be met or overrides those standards. And if this minimum should be required, the exemption that's proposed in the amendment language should include lots owned as of the amendment effective date, because most lots in SCAN were platted like 50 to 100 years ago. So the existing exemption that refers to just lots platted in the last 10 years gives no protection to SCAN. We oppose the mixed use 3 zone setback capped at 50 feet. If a cap is needed, SCAN suggests a 70-foot cap would provide more meaningful setback protection for abutting residential uses. And we oppose eliminating a minimum parking requirement in the mixed use zones located within a quarter mile of the core network. It is unrealistic to assume mixed use zones along the core network will not generate increased traffic and require at least some parking. In SCAN, residential zones abut the proposed mixed use zones on both sides of Commercial Street Southeast from Mission to Vista, or are only a block away. Traffic generated by the mixed uses will go into the local residential streets looking for parking. Thank you, and we'd like to thank Eunice and staff for all their work on this whole comp plan update, and thank you commissioners as well. Okay, now I'm not hearing President Griggs. Are you?
Jane, you're muted.
Yep, yeah, I just figured that out. Any questions for Roz at this time? Giving you time to think. I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Roz. It was good to see you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You bet. Next up is Steve Anderson. And Steve, I know you know the drill. Name and address for the record, and you have 10 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioners. Steve Anderson, West Salem Neighborhood Association Land Use Chair, Ward 8. First, we want to start by thanking Eunice for her staff and her staff for the work in the community. She spent a lot of time at the Edgewater Market on Thursdays at the neighborhood association meetings for the DOT process and all of that. She and Julie came out a week ago Monday to a special neighborhood association where we reached out through our chair to invite neighbors to come in and get involved in the process. They answered a lot of questions. They stayed up late. And so we're just a big thank you to the hard work of Eunice, Julie, and others of staff. I'd like to start off by a request. We would like the record to be held open for 7 days so we can provide additional written testimony. And that at this meeting, there are several concerns about the zoning issues and traffic issues that were explained at that meeting on Monday night. The neighborhood association did not take an official position at that time because it wasn't part of the meeting. You'll hear from neighbors on that, but we'll let it go at that. The perception that West Salem Neighborhood Association doesn't support multifamily is a false statement. I just want to share a couple ideas here. We work with Eunice to add multifamily along Eola Drive. We worked to review the placement and the appropriate density in that area. We worked hard on the old craft industrial area where the canneries are in Edgewater to get that a M3 zone. And to do that for the reasons we wanted to have fast development in that area, working with urban renewal. We see the density in that infill area makes sense. It facilitates greater economic growth in our community, and it's going to create jobs. So we're very supportive of that. We're grateful that Eunice worked to preserve the old historical industrial zone in that area. Salem Electric is housed in that area with their laydown yards, and they provide electricity to our neighborhood. So we're glad to keep them. And we worked on also extending the 2nd Street zone all along Patterson to provide a greater density in that area and promote that zone. And we worked with a large property owner on Marine Drive to provide a connection of multifamily along Marine Drive. So we've worked hard with Eunice to support this effort to help come up with our needs within West Salem. We have a responsibility, since we have a lower density in our neighborhoods, to contribute to the numbers in the community. We do have one request. We would ask the Planning Commission to recommend to City Council that the mixed-use zone proposed for the Foursquare Church at the intersection of Eola Drive and Dokes Ferry not be put into place. This started back before our Salem took place. We came to the planning people and said, we want to update our neighborhood plan. We think that the neighborhood hub concept that was in the neighborhood plan for this area was obsolete. And we wanted to make some adjustments to support density in the future in other areas of West Salem. We were told to wait and do that with our Salem, so we gradually agreed. We have worked all through the our Salem process to make this happen, and we've reduced the density in that area. But for some reason, somebody in the planning department just keeps saying, and doesn't explain who they are, that they oppose this. And we worked hard with Eunice to get an equal number of acreage, or probably at least twice as much acreage of this one little parcel to accommodate that. So we weren't asking for a give me on this one. We said we will help find other areas to compensate for that, but we don't think that that is a good use. The owner doesn't support that either. In the past, we have supported multifamily at that area on Geller, and we have a good multifamily development in that area, but we do not think that the Foursquare Church, an existing property owner, should have to have multifamily at this time. If it happens in the future, we're not a problem with it, but at this time, we're requesting the Planning Commission recommend that this parcel not be zoned multifamily. There's a lot of reasons more for that, and I'd be interested in knowing what the Planning Commission needs to support that. But and you can share that with us, and we can provide that in comments. But basically, the Neighborhood Association appreciates the work of Eunice. We have worked hard to find development sites that will revitalize the Edgewater district provide multifamily across the area. We know that there are some areas in our community that is not supported, and you'll hear from them tonight. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to quit early. We really appreciate the work there. We are fine with the densities, all of the work that is in the plan. Our one objection is that property of the Foursquare property, which the owner doesn't want. And it was inconsistent with what we wanted to do to modernize our neighborhood plan. And we've provided more than enough to cover that acreage in the plan. So I'll take any questions,
Okay.
but we're generally supportive of what's going on.
Thank you, Steve. Mr. Anderson. Questions for Mr. Anderson from commissioners? I think you are off the hook. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, Chairman, for your time.
You betcha. So we're going to move into the general public testimony, just a little bit different on this. You have 5 minutes. As I call your name, we have about 23 of you. If you could state your name and address for the record before you begin your testimony. We'll start with Sadie Carney, representing Chariots, I believe. Hi, Sadie.
Hi, I think you can probably hear me.
Yep, can hear you
All right.
perfect.
So good evening, and thank you. For the record, Sadie Carney. I am the Vice President of the Chariots Board, representing Subdistrict 3 for our Transit Board. And I live at 1595 5th Street Northeast in Salem. And I was the Transit Board representative for the Our Salem project. As the governing board for the public transportation provider for Salem, Kaiser, Marion, and Polk counties, the Chariots Board of Directors wants to express our strong support for the Our Salem project and proposed comprehensive plan and zoning revisions shown in the updated vision map. As Commissioner Levin said, not only is this proposal very reasonable and well thought out, but I really believe that it positions Salem as a city that will realize the adopted Our Salem vision of creating a Salem that is livable, equitable, and carbon neutral. And also, as he noted, the public outreach on this project was incredible. I have huge admiration for the efforts made by the planning department from the city of Salem, and in particular, all of the efforts Eunice Kim personally put into this project. I want to thank our neighborhood associations for their responses to this really important work and these changes. In Scan's comments, they called out the Chariots Core Network, which creates the backbone of our transit service. The coordination of transportation and land use planning efforts that are included in the goals of Our Salem will ensure infrastructure improvements that support transit-oriented development patterns and greater housing densities. As a board member, I also want to applaud the city staff, City of Salem staff, for the current coordination efforts that they make with the Chariots planning staff, which has allowed us to be much more responsive to development in the city in recent years. To Commissioner Slater's point, the need for significant improvements to the transportation system plan will result from approval and adoption of the Our Salem work. Street design, sidewalk widths, transit priority lanes, an increase in our bicycle network, better prioritization of pedestrian and alternative modes, and both the reduction and pricing of parking will all support the goals laid out in Our Salem and shared by the Chariots governing board. As a board, we are in strong support of the elimination of parking minimums. Excess parking has had a significant negative impact on housing costs, business costs, the feasibility of housing development and business redevelopment, walkability, air and water pollution, climate pollution, and general community character. Current parking mandates force people who don't own or use cars to pay indirectly for other people's parking. Carless households tend to be the poorest households. Parking demand varies significantly from development to development, and about 1/6 of Oregon renter households own 0 vehicles. Planning practices from the past have imposed a one-size-fits-all requirement everywhere, creating incentives to own more cars and drive more. We propose that the City of Salem take strong action and eliminate parking mandates, allowing developers the flexibility to right-size parking for new development and allowing businesses to operate in locations with limited parking. Finally, I want to take this opportunity to share our support for the environmental and climate justice goals laid out in Our Salem. They propose to address the transportation needs and safety of people of all ages, abilities, races, ethnicities, and incomes, including those who have been historically marginalized or underserved. The transportation investments of the city and MPO should respond to the needs of system users, be context sensitive, and distribute the benefits and impacts of transportation decisions in an equitable manner throughout the Salem urban area. Transportation and land use planning investments made in the past have had a negative impact on low-income populations, communities of color, and other underserved communities. Our future investments should seek to correct these injustices. We also submitted written comment that has a little bit more detail. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Carney. Commissioner Slater, you have a question.
Thank you. Ms. Carney, I'm wondering if there are any recommendations that Chariot's had that are not reflected in the draft.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Carney? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony and your written testimony too. Appreciate it. We'll move on to Ezra Rabi, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Ezra, are you there? Here with us?
Hi, I just trying to get everything set up.
Oh, you bet.
Thank
Did I
you.
mispronounce your name? If I did, I apologize.
No, you didn't. It's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Okay, so you can put the egg timer on.
Okay.
Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on behalf of my property. I don't represent a neighborhood and I don't have all those sort of very generalized comments to make. And I've never before been in attendance at a zoning hearing, so please excuse if I speak in unsophisticated lay terms. My property is currently zoned CR, or commercial retail, and the proposed new zoning designation is MU1. I'm requesting a zoning of MU3 primarily to include one particular significant best use application of the property in my mind, that of permitting drive-through development. The reasons for this, I hope, will come across as intuitively reasonable ones. First, the property is on a major arterial on Center Street Northeast, across from the Safeway, and it meets the MU3 requirement of frequent transit service. In fact, there's a Chariot's shelter there, just abutting my property right on Center Street. Second, it lies outside the city perimeter, the city center perimeter, and would not create congestion in the downtown core, nor deprive surrounding streets of city parking availability. Third, a drive-in would third, the immediately adjacent area already has a mixed-use 3 type of ambiance with state and commercial office buildings, banking, Willamette University, a McDonald's drive-through, major grocery, the Safeway, as well as single and multi-family residential use. So it really lies in the heart of an already mixed-use area. Drive-throughs require no major infrastructure change, such as utility lines, is another important factor. They're small and they're efficient. But most importantly, I feel it would really further benefit the immediate community. When one thinks of drive-throughs, they immediately associate that with fast foods, but they can be of so much more benefit than that in an area that could and should accommodate it easily, such as a gas station combined with a late night, I forgot it type store, a coffee shop, a bank, or a pharmacy, which allows the elderly, infirm, and mobility impaired to access services they would otherwise have to struggle to acquire in conventional locations. And about those fast food places, the trend now is really towards a much healthier alternative. So they're also making great headway with fast food and drive-throughs. In fact, their use has increased substantially for both motorists and pedestrians alike. And by the way, drive-throughs proved to be a significant advantage during the pandemic and are still a popular choice for those who are still wary of abandoning all precautions such as masks and distancing. Standalone restaurants often have a drive-through also for those who wish to avoid indoor driving. So it doesn't have to be a drive-through to the exclusion of a standalone restaurant. It can be both. And society is moving sort of in that direction, in my view. Should you approve an MU3 designation for the property, it could encourage more activity that's creative and better use to enhance the immediate community. I'd urge you to please consider zoning of my property as MU3. It really is a good fit. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Raby. Questions from commissioners? Commissioner Ekus.
Excuse me. I wonder are you familiar with the maps that the zoning change maps, and can you give me the or do you know which map your property is on, or could you give me an address for your property again?
Yeah, it's a 1280 Center Street Northeast, across from the Safeway. It's between 12th and 13th.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Levin, your hand is down. Did you change your mind, Commissioner Levin?
No, I was the comment from Commissioner Ekus took care of it. I was going to point out that we did not get an address from Mr. Raby, and then I was also going to ask specifically which lot it was. So that got covered.
That got covered. Okay. Is that the lot, Mr. Raby, that is where the micro shelter is going to be sited?
Yes, it is exactly that lot.
Okay. Was just curious. Any other questions for Mr. Raby? Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Okay.
Glad you joined us. Next up, I know I'm going to not pronounce this correctly. Marjorie Metz. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. It's pronounced Kometz.
Kamel. So you do pronounce the K. Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Thank you.
All right.
Name and address for the record, please.
Yes. Whoops. Here I am.
There you are.
339 Summit View Avenue, Salem Southeast. And I am here to represent about 30 of my residents that live around the property that's up for sale, the Taccio farm of 13.34 acres. I spoke to all of those people. We've all wanted some of the land there to be left as woodland because it has beautiful birds and marmots and coyotes perhaps, and an eagle now and again. And we've lived in our house about 7 years, and it's been very, very nice. But then as I started talking to the folks that live down the hill on the three streets that I was involved with was my own, Summit View, Gadwall, and Widgeon. And most of the residents that lived on Widgeon told me about that part of the land is a wetland. I mean, that's why I guess there's those huge cottonwood trees. And they have rivers running through the back, not in their backyard, but around and down. I don't think, from my humble opinion, the land isn't compatible with being built on safely. And I think that City Parks and Natural Residence Planning Manager is going to be at this meeting. And my thought was that perhaps the property could be bought by the city and keep it as a some kind of a very humble park. Nothing to really be developed on it unless I'm wrong and it's really able to be built on. And if it is, in parts of it, I would hope that the trees would that cover the outside of the 13 acres to the houses that are built. There would be a nice barrier put with where some of the animal life and wildlife would and the trees would remain. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms.
Yeah, and could I ask though, if the other city parks and natural resource manager could answer my question about there being the possibility of the city buying the land? I know for a fact that Hollis Hilfiger, some years ago, the city paid for his acreage, and it has remained beautiful. And there is some kind of a tree farm on it, but that's all. And I actually spoke to Mr. Taccio before his death, and he told me he would love to have the property saved.
Okay, so what this time is really for us to hear from you. When we go back, the commission goes back and asks questions of staff.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
make sure that we note your question, Ms. Kometz.
Okay.
So do we have any questions from planning commissioners of Ms. Kometz at this time? I am not seeing any. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure that we ask that question of staff during that section of time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Eunice and Shelby.
You bet. Next up is Alex Buron. Name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Alex Buron. I live in Ward 6, and I'll send you my address on the chat if that's okay, just because this is being live streamed. Okay, thank you. So my name is Alex Buron. I am a community organizer in Salem who organizes in Northeast Salem. I've lived here my whole life along with my parents who are working class. And I'm here to tell y'all that low-income housing and low-income housing needs to be built, not just in Northeast Salem, but in South and West Salem, and also not next to factories that emit pollution that potentially causes cancers and other diseases. Because that happens to be the reality for many of us in Northeast Salem, many of us who don't get included into discussions like this, or in places like this, where a lot of decisions are made that affect our lives. In 2020, we were not only dealing with a pandemic, we were also dealing with 2 climate catastrophes when we had the wildfires and also the winter icy weather. And we saw how much of a problem it is, how much of a disaster it is for us just to move around during these times. When you push a population of people into one area, not only is it immoral, but it is also classist and environmentally racist. A lot of the low-income people and people of color in Salem, we live along I-5, we live along factories. We're constantly breathing in diesel pollution. We're constantly breathing in pollutions from a lot of factories. And that has an effect on our lifespans and our health. Many of us are also people who don't have health insurance. And you may ask, why do you want housing low-income housing to be built in West and South Salem? Well, I heard someone talk about trees a little bit ago. Here in Northeast Salem, there is no trees. We are only met with pollution. So putting us in one place, like I mentioned, is wrong, and it's also detrimental to our health. But also putting us here is also limiting us to points of opportunity. A lot of places in Northeast Salem are located in food deserts. So our only options to eat are unhealthy foods, or we had to drive a long ways to go get groceries. So I'm here also to support the R Salem equity portion, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I'm glad you joined us, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Questions from commissioners? Oh, Commissioner Slater has a question for you.
Thank you. I just wanted to let you know that I agree with most of your statements, and I think that the R Salem plan hopefully has the policies in place to achieve kind of what you're hoping it does. If you have any more thoughts on the equity portion or other portions of it, please feel free to share it with us. And I'll be kind of happy to pass a question on to staff when we return to staff questions. So thank you again.
Any other questions? And Mr. Buron, if you wouldn't mind putting your address in, just so they have it for the written record, that would be great. Okay, next up is Alexander Sosa Navarro. Are you here? There.
Yes.
Got it?
Could you guys hear me?
We sure can. If you would give us your name and address for the record, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah. So my name is Alex. I live in Northeast Salem, Ward 5, with the address being 3850 Portland Road, Northeast. And I'm here to support low-income housing developments in all of Salem, including South Salem and West Salem. Low-income housing in those areas will benefit generations to come for about 20 years plus. And that's why I support, putting public housing in those areas like South Salem and West Salem. And I think it's important as well to look at where our housing, our low-income housings are put in place right now. Like the other Alex had kind of explained, our low-income housing, as someone who lived in low-income housing for many of years, that I lived in Salem for all my life, I've seen that these places and where I was put is next to factories, next to freeways, not next, putting these places where there's not enough trees, where the factories were put in place next to are polluting the air, where our children, our brothers, our siblings play outside, and especially next to a park here in Northgate. There is a Northgate Park, and right around the corner there's a whole factory. So that's some worries that I have, is these places, these low-income housings, and our BIPOC communities are being placed into these places where they're being polluted with their air, and not given enough resources, or either living in food deserts. It's important that our low-income housing families are put into places where it's more beneficial for them, as for their children and as for the parents, growing in today's society. And I also want to bring up, our families don't deserve to be put in those places. They deserve to be put in those areas where we don't have to worry about if our children are going to be playing outside and the air is being polluted by factories nearby. And as well, I don't know if you guys know what a food desert is, and it's important to know what a food desert, especially within working in this area, and working with communities of color. I'll kind of explain what a food desert is, and especially how it looks on Portland Road. So Portland Road right now has no grocery stores nearby. They have gas stations, they have convenience stores that just sell snacks. But of course, we want our families to live in a healthy way and buy healthy foods for their children. And that's what I hear from everybody, and as well as everybody in the communities. We want those things to be put in place for our communities. But yet we're served with like convenience stores, and we're served with gas stations. And as well as working with this food desert, it's important to put in those places where there's grocery stores, but there's also important to make sure those places aren't being gentrified as well. Gentrification is a big part of like this work here. And it harms a lot of communities of color and low income especially. And I think that's important to recognize within working with food deserts here on Portland Road and Northeast, that we see that these families deserve better, and they know they deserve better. And as your job to put these policies in place and put these things in place, it's important for you all to make sure these families are putting in places that will make them uplift themselves and not like harm them as what we're doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Navarro. Do we have any questions from commissioners for Mr. Navarro? I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm glad you joined us and shared your thoughts. Next, we have Luis Acosta Vega.
Hi, hello. My name is Luis, and for the record, I live in Ward 6. I'm also going to personally send
my address to you all since we're being live.
Okay.
But I'm a community member and I'm also a community organizer. And I also support the Salem Project. And I wanted to also talk on the subject of low-income housing. So first and foremost, I support low-income housing because the cost of living is too high for people just to put a roof over their heads. You have families who are being gentrified out of their neighborhoods and who have no places to live. And in the areas that they do live, there's gas stations, there's factories, there's pesticides. And, that's really affecting a lot of our community members, especially down here in Northeast. And I wanted to talk more about these families. These families are also single moms with kids. They have babies and they're trying to find a place to settle down and raise their children. These people are people of color, farm workers who spend a majority of their days working in the fields in the most hazardous and harsh conditions. And all they want is a roof over their heads. These people are young people going into adulthood and seeking places to jumpstart their futures. And lastly, these are people who have respiratory problems and illnesses, and they're being forced to live right next to freeways, factories, gas stations, and areas of mass pollution down here in Northeast Salem. And so this brings me all to the responsibility that you all have to make these solutions and make these implications in West and South Salem. This is a very urgent and critical issue that we need in our community. We need low-income housing to be built in order to support our working class families, our families of color. And, not supporting that is nothing less than classism. It's nothing less than environmental racism. And furthermore, like the way that this city treats low-income residents is very hurtful to see, because you have a lot of wealthy people in South and West Salem who face the luxuries of not experiencing what it's really like to live paycheck to paycheck. And it's even more hurtful knowing that, these vast lands are here, the resources are here, it can be made, and it's a critical solution that we need in our community. We're the people, we're the working class, we're the people who make up this city. And regardless of what, the classist or the privileged have to say, this is necessary in order for us to all advance in the future. So I urge you all to do the right thing. Please offer more low-income housing in West and South Salem. And thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vega. Questions from the commissioners for Mr. Vega? I am not seeing any hands raised. Thank you for your time. Next up is Anthony Martinez.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, name and address if you don't mind.
Yeah, I'll say my name, but I'll put my address directly, messenger directly.
That'd be great.
All right, cool. My name is, my name is Tony. I'm 19 years old. I live in Northeast Salem, part of Salem. My testimony is going to be about supporting affordable housing in South Salem because historically people who are displaced should have opportunity for affordable housing. With affordable housing, it will benefit the next generation to come. Not only that, I want to see affordable housing in South Salem, but we should also have affordable housing in West. The power dynamic between us and them is uttermost because they may look at us as in poor and educated people, but that isn't the case. When we discuss big plans in Salem, they don't mention about the people who are most affected, and that is the people of color. We always get left behind, so much so that our voices don't matter or get drained out. When this type of stuff happens, we get placed in stuffed areas. And that's why North Salem High School and McKay High School are overcrowded. Affordable housing is essential in Salem because people are one paycheck away from being houseless and thrown in the streets. And what I see in my neighborhood is rich people flipping houses that raise the rent up to the point where people need to leave. Do you know what that is called? It's called gentrification. Gentrification is the process whereby the character of a poor urban area is changed by the wealthier people moving in, improving housing and attracting new businesses, typically displacing current inhabitants in the process. What that definition means to me is that we're getting kicked out by the rich people because we're poor. Overall, I truly support affordable housing. Take me and my peers' testimony to the heart because I'm a 19-year-old that is living in a neighborhood that is getting gentrified and who's most affected by pollution and food deserts.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Martinez? Thank you, Mr. Martinez, for your time. Next, we have Nayeli Cruz. Nayeli Cruz. How close was I on your name pronunciation? Did I get it?
It's Nayeli. Nayeli.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
Name and address. Oh, you said your name, your address if you're comfortable sharing that, or you can put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
That'd be great.
I'm calling today to support Eunice's Salem proposal with some discrepancies. We need new low-income housing developments built in all of Salem, including South and West Salem. We cannot concentrate all buildings solely in Northeast Salem. It's classist and environmentally racist. There's freeways and factories. Low-income housing should be near parks and safely away from freeways. Keeping low-income housing in Northeast Salem has caused de facto segregation. This is why North and McKay have been overcrowded and the reason why South and West Salem are majority white. Having low income and public housing in South and West Salem will create more affordable permanent housing and will benefit generations to come.
Do we have questions? Appreciate your testimony, Ms. Cruz. Any questions from commissioners? Thank you for your time. Next up, we have Cindy Rico. Hey, we see you.
Hi, my name is Cindy, and I'm actually going to put my address in the chat if that's fine.
That's great.
I'm a community member and organizer, and I'm here today because I support a plan that supports permanent low-income housing in all of Salem, but especially in South and West Salem, because only concentrating low-income housing in Northeast Salem is incredibly classist and inevitably creates and promotes environmental racism and segregation. This means there's food deserts, so people don't have the privilege to have access to a variety of healthy food, which should be a right. But they have access to stuff like McDonald's and other fast food corporations that only further fund racial disparities and racial capitalism. And on top of this, we all know that fast food places only deteriorate people's health and livelihood. So there's also factories here, and people live close to freeways next to I-5. A lot of children and people have really bad asthma, so that only further puts their health at an even greater risk. And there's also housing next to gas stations, and we live in a toxic pollution every day that is only actively shortening our lifespans. So another thing is that in the past, the city has really made it their mission to manipulate a lot of folks with the language that is used to talk about housing. So saying that we need, quote, diverse income housing is said to only cater to white rich audiences and gives the false narrative that the city cares for low income residents when we know that historically they haven't. This is why it's essential to explicitly advocate for affordable low income housing now and in the future. And on top of the importance of having affordable low income housing in West Salem and South Salem, multifamily housing also needs to be advocated for in areas that are not near factories or gas stations, because this would be overall hypocritical when trying to get to the root of the problem, which is ultimately environmental racism, gentrification, and displacement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rico. Any questions from commissioners? Thank you for your time. I appreciate that.
Oh, sorry, I had one, if I could. I just was
You sure may, Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. So when you speak about low-income housing, are you talking about housing that the city itself is purchasing and building, or Section 8 vouchers? Or are you just talking about affordable housing that is built kind of by developers in the market? I'm just trying to understand which piece we're talking about here.
I'm talking about all lower income and affordable housing, all of it. Like the more the better, because I mean, if you know the city, if the city is building or saying it's building diverse or mixed income housing, that doesn't really cover like the entire issue about how the city needs to have low income housing overall.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Rico. Next up is Nancy McDaniel. Hi, Nancy.
Hello, my name is Nancy McDaniel. I live at 265 21st Street Northeast in Salem. And I wanted to talk, I was involved in development of the NEN Cessna neighborhood plan, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how the plan relates to our Salem. When we were developing the plan, we spent a lot of time, we looked at areas where increased density made sense in the neighborhood and where it didn't. And one of the things that came out of that was the mixed use zoning along State Street. It led to the State Street Corridor Project, which led to the implementation of mixed use zoning all along the corridor there. But I wanted to talk about some of the recommendations that we were hoping, that I was hoping would get addressed in our Salem and that didn't make it in. And these were for several smaller areas in the NEN neighborhood. We identified them when we were looking at the plan because they're little islands of currently zoned multifamily 2 that are in the middle of single family zoning. And we had recommended that the multifamily 2 get changed to residential duplex. I believe because at the time that gave more flexibility before code change to allow the missing middle housing. So the first area is the section of 18th Street immediately north of the historic district to Center Street. It's an old neighborhood, just like the historic district. There's a historic building in it, the Bone Steel House. And the lots are really small, and to implement the residential multifamily 2 zoning in that area would mean combining properties and destroying the houses and basically destroying a neighborhood that's been there for over 100 years. And the second area is Thompson and Catterlin streets, and these are between Center Street and the Jason Lee Cemetery. And both of these streets, and they're immediately adjacent to each other, and both of these streets are just a great example of how you can have the middle housing in a neighborhood. Because I walked there the other day, and there's 4 sets of cottage clusters in that small area there. And I think whatever new development would ever go in to implement the multifamily would never be as affordable as those cottage clusters. So I'm just here to ask the Planning Commission to take a look into to consider the recommendations of the neighborhood plan and see if you think that zoning makes sense there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McDaniel. Questions of Ms. McDaniel from commissioners? I don't see any, so thank you for your time. Next up, we have Charlene Gonzalez.
Good evening. My name is Charlene Gonzalez. I'm a resident of Ward 6 at 4527 Maria Avenue. And I want to first express appreciation to the staff for all their work. And then I'm here to request that the current zoning of 2390 Brown Road is retained rather than rezoned to a neighborhood hub. So I appreciate the concept of neighborhood hubs, and I see that they're easier to plan in newer developments. Our neighbors near that property have ample access to commercial opportunities and services, as well as transit. And more importantly, we would like to retain the safety improvements that we gained with the recent improvement of Brown Road. There were sidewalks and bike lanes added to Brown Road, and we are so grateful for that. We feel that our children and our elders especially are safer now than they were. Brown Road is the access for a number of schools. And so we believe that the neighborhood opportunity creates opportunity, that the neighborhood hub creates opportunity to compromise that safety. So I did submit written testimony, but I wanted to just augment that a little bit tonight. And my testimony tried to show some photos of where across the street from that location, we have the intersection of Maria Avenue to Brown Road. And that location is right next to the soon to be developed Brown Road Park. So neighbors coming from Maria Avenue onto Brown Road don't have visibility. While that was great improvements of the sidewalks and bike lanes, the placement of that wasn't perfect in our older neighborhood. And so when neighbors are coming off of Maria, they don't have visibility from the stop line, so they have to push out. And that creates a sense of urgency getting onto that road. We see examples of neighborhood hubs while they're designed to attract pedestrian traffic, they do attract vehicular traffic. And so having that opportunity there could just amplify that, that unique problem we have right there. To further complicate it, right in front of that property is a bus stop. We love that bus stop. It gives us access. It's great right next to the park, but we also know that drivers aren't always patient waiting behind a stop bus. So while we appreciate the intent behind the placement of that by staff, we really feel that there's the potential to compromise the safety that we've gained for our residents. And we would prefer to prioritize that safety over potential opportunities for commercial access that we don't feel that we are lacking. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Questions for Mrs. Gonzalez from the commissioners? I am not seeing any. Thank you very much for your time. So next we have, I'm going to start with Cecilia Urbani. Name and address for the record, and then I'll go to you, Craig, and you'll have your own separate time.
Good evening, Madam President and members of the Planning Commission. We live at Cecilia DeSantis Urbani, and we live at 370 College Drive Northwest. And I've submitted written comments for your consideration. And we're talking about maps number 170 and 171 in the College and Stoneway Drive area. For the property that is listed on map 170, which is generally speaking at 255 College Drive Northwest, we are opposed to the change for multifamily designation and RM1 zoning.
I'm going to stop you just for a second, but I'll give you a couple of extra seconds. I understand from staff that they can pull up the map and show us. I didn't realize this earlier in testimony. So Shelby, could we pull up the map so we can see exactly where Ms. Urbani is referring to? And then we'll just
thank you.
Add a couple of minutes on.
Okay.
Thanks.
All's cool. Been there, done that.
Yeah. Here it comes. Thank you. Okay, you can keep going, and then we'll just add a minute to you.
Okay, so so you can see the property there in blue. So it's existing public, and it's the original site of the Salem Academy School. If some of you old timers like me might remember, from first grade to 12th grade, Salem Academy was located there, and they've sold to a church many years ago, And so here we are today with the Salem proposal for multifamily. College Drive is a local street. It is not designed nor improved to safely handle the increase in traffic. It's a 2-lane with ditches on both sides, very narrow, curvy street in the hilly area. So we're not sure that the transportation system that's in place would support any more intensification of use. Also, the storm drainage is really an issue in our area, and any intensification, we just feel like that would be another negative factor. The other thing is on the map where you see that green vegetation, all of that is outside of the city of Salem and outside the urban growth boundary. So what we're talking about is the western edge of the city limits and the urban growth boundary. So to have this additional density at the edge doesn't seem to make sense. Also, there's been in the past always a desire to put multifamily where there is services, especially transit is an important thing. And there is none of that in existence for this property. Also, my last point on this piece of property is that the staff report that updates the housing needs analysis says that we've had over 3,000 building permits, multifamily dwelling building permits during that 6-year time period. And so projecting that out, the staff report says that we'll have a surplus of over 1,000 multifamily dwelling units if all of these properties that are proposed in the Salem are approved, which means that we have a surplus. And so because this property doesn't meet a whole lot of the other criteria, we're requesting that it not be approved. Thank you for your time. And we'd also like to request that the public hearing be continued rather than just holding open the record for written comments because of the complexity of this and the length of all of the reports to be reviewed to continue the hearing. And so there could be continued dialogue between citizens and the Planning Commission. And we want to thank staff, of course, for all of your hard work.
Thank you. Questions of Ms. Urbani? Okay, so Mr. Craig Urbani, you're up next.
Hey, I can't really tell if
There he is.
Okay. My wife has made most of the points. I do want to reiterate that this street is turnpike improved. There are no sidewalks. It's a narrow, curvy street, and there is no transit in the area. The closest transit stop is clear down on Highway 22. It's about a mile, at least 3/4, if not a mile from this property. And that's the closest transit stop that I'm aware of. And now we want to talk about map number 171, some property at Stoneway Drive Northwest. And we support to change to RS. This property should be single family to be compatible with the surrounding single family area. The vehicle access on the Stowaway would be very dangerous for an increase in density and intensity. Again, it is a narrow local street with no sidewalks. The existing multifamily parking across the street backs directly onto Stoneway, causing hazards. And this is very steep land, and it's actually landslide prone. And therefore, the amount of grading for future development should be reduced. And I will also offer my thanks to city staff for the work that they have done on this significant project.
Thank you, Mr. Rabani. Questions from commissioners? Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming, or, zooming in. Next up, Mr. Shipman. Mark Shipman.
Thank you, Madam President. I think at this time I'd like to have Jeremy Schoenfelter go first.
Okay. So Jeremy, and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Shipman, for your testimony.
Thank you.
You bet. Jeremy, name and address for the record, please.
Sure. This is Jeremy Schoenfelder. Address is 1900 Hines Street Southeast here in Salem. First, I'd like to commend staff on getting this our Salem project this far. It's a heavy lift with a lot of nuance. So that's just would like to extend my kudos to them. I'm actually here to talk about the property on the southeast corner of Kubler and 27th Avenue. And if some of you recall, we actually were the subject of a zoning change that was ratified on February 1st by Planning Commission to have that zoned CR. To be clear and transparent, we are actually going to council on the 28th. However, we've continued to work with the neighborhood association, which is South Gateway. I'm actually meeting with them again on Friday with the thought of, during our comments from public and staff, it was brought up to look at mixed use options for this particular property. And we did that during the process, but couldn't get all the way to the finish line to really, change our thought process of where we were going. But we are going to meet with Cigna on that, with the idea of potentially split zoning the property to both CR and MU2. And with this in the R Salem plan, it's currently slated to be CO, commercial office. So I'm kind of here just appealing to staff and the commission to look at this as a split zone of CR, and actually with the MU3, assuming that goes through as we've read the draft thus far, a split between CR and MU3. Again, this is in the midst of conversations. We're trying to work and be great neighbors. It's in the midst of conversations with South Gateway, but they do seem to be, we do seem to be making some progress. Obviously, time will tell. And so if we get there by the 28th, I'd kind of like to, have this be consistent with what the neighborhood has decided as a collective. So.
Thank you. Questions of Mr. Schoenfelder from commissioners? Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time. Mr. Shipman, you're up next.
Thank you, President Griggs. And thanks for the opportunity to testify before you tonight. What Mr. Schoenfelder is referring to is reference map 99 for the Kubler Cascade property, as he identified at the southeast corner of Kubler and 27th Street. Based on his testimony tonight, and I know that the record has been requested to be kept open, what I like to do is be able to just note to the Planning Commission that we intend to submit some additional written testimony and possibly even a diagram that would identify exactly where we would like to have the CR and the MU3 zone boundaries on the proposed property. So thank you for this opportunity. We'll be back before you either in person at the next hearing, if it's continued, at least in writing during the open record period. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman. Questions from commissioners? Okay. Next up, we have Nick Forty.
Oh, hi. Yeah, this is Nick Forty. Can I able to share my screen, or is that not allowed? I don't know if that's a.
I have no idea.
If not, I can just go extemporaneously. But I had a little presentation. It's all right either way.
You can share.
Can I do
It'll
that?
allow you to share. Yep.
Just give me a second. Can you see?
Oh,
tell me
you
what
almost had it. Yep, you got it now.
Okay, so I'll just go here. So this has to do with.
Oh, could you say your name, state your name and address for the
Sorry,
record?
yeah, Nick 40. I'm a resident of West Salem, 2165 Turnage Street Northwest. So this has to do with map 170 rezoning. You heard some earlier testimony on that subject. And this has to do with that same property that's on College Drive. And you're well aware of what your goals are, but I just wanted to kind of reiterate what I see as some incompatibility between the goals that are articulated in our Salem, which I think are very sound, and I firmly believe in those. But I think the difficulty here is that the property, the rezoning is incompatible with the majority of the goals that I've outlined here. And you have my written testimony here, but I'll just talk about some of these things in general here. The context sensitive development. When you look at the existing development in the area and the existing neighborhood development, you'll see that a lot of the public needs in terms of sidewalk, bike lanes, and just the cross section of the roadway would really require significant additional funding. And these are not going to be coming from the developer. These would have to come from city funds because this is an extensive, it's a network improvements that would have to be done here. And so that's why the concern is that even transportation system development charges would be insufficient to provide the changes that need to be put in place here. And even the alternative street designs would be incompatible because simply because of the configuration of the network, this sort of thing wouldn't work. And I'll talk about some of these other things here. I think a lot of these things, that the importance of putting pedestrian connections, bicycle connections, transit system, connectivity, all very important, but it doesn't really work in this context, given the fact that the existing roadway network doesn't have any sort of bicycle facilities, and to provide bike lanes, provide sidewalks, while they could be done, it would have significant impact to the existing neighborhood and to not just the existing neighborhood, but also to the environmental. We have a large tree canopy in this area. We have, side slopes for providing drainage. And I think what I wanted to show here, and the reason I wanted to do this presentation, so this is if you look to the right here, this is the property that's under question here, where the Salem Academy is. And you can see this is the cross section of the roadway. So there's no sidewalks, no bike lanes, and we already have an existing apartment complex. If this is looking down College Drive that goes towards Highway 22. So I wanted to make it clear that we already have existing multifamily here, and it works. The issue is providing additional multifamily here in the context of the existing neighborhood is, I think, fundamentally incompatible. And even with all these goals here, the cost of so doing, both in terms of its fiscal cost as well as its cost to the integrity and the impact to the environmental cohesion of the neighborhood, would be pretty great. And this is a photo. This is looking up the street. This is the existing driveway that goes to the upper parking lot where the Salem Academy, as you can see, just to kind of the middle of that picture here. But it just shows you here an example of, this is a pretty tight cross section here. In fact, you're looking about 20 feet from edge line to edge line. So it's already, if you will, underperforming as an existing roadway. So it's a pretty tight cross section that we've got here in place. And you can see there's no sidewalks, no bike lanes, anything like that. This is going further up the street here. So you can see it's a pretty, you can see some of these curves going through the alignment here, and it's hilly, but this also shows you that there's a lot of vegetation here. We've got ditches that provide the drainage. So yes, we could do all these things, right? If you want to put in a rider roadway, you want to put in sidewalks and bike lanes, but there's an impact, and the impact would have to be, you got to put in closed drainage system, very, very high expense. And I'll just follow here with this final thing. You can see how that this is as the roadway continues up. But what I wanted to show here, and I think the important thing is, it's not just this property, it's what it means in terms of the, that connectivity. So yeah, we do have an existing street network, but to make the whole thing work, which is, I think, really one of the fundamental aims of our Salem, right? To provide that connectivity so people don't have to use their single occupancy vehicle, so they can take transit, so they can walk, so they can take bicycle. Those are fantastic aims. The difficulty is trying to make that thing work in this context, I think, is highly problematic. And that's why I would be supportive of not putting.
Your time is up, Mr. Forty. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Questions of Mr. Forty? Apologize for having to cut you off, but
that's all right.
Thank you for your time. We are down to our last four, just to give you guys hope. Next up is Matt Wade. Name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, thank you. Matt Wade at 380 College Drive. I'm addressing the same issue that has just been addressed previously, very eloquently, and by Cecilia and Craig earlier. So just to kind of a couple notes, I mean, I obviously too oppose this rezoning to multifamily. This is a narrower country-like road. It doesn't, to me, seem like it's able to handle or would be smart to add that added congestion. And then to add on one note that just gives it kind of clear from that, if you're on that property, if that were to be rezoned to multifamily, all that added congestion. And if you were trying to go from that to, say, downtown Salem or any other part, Northeast Salem or South Salem, there's basically a couple ways where you could go. There's Highway 22 that runs there. If you go down that road and then you go down to Highway 22, you're gonna have to try to go across 2 lanes of traffic and then get in the middle lane, people going super fast, very unsafe. I don't think anybody in that neighborhood likes to do that or does that. The other way is to go down, which is the fastest way, is to go all the way down Turnage, and then Turnage hooks up to Eola. And Turnage is a super narrow, windy road that is, I don't even really take it because I think it's dangerous. You basically would have to, like, when there's 2 cars coming, you have to pull over to the side street so that car can pass. And then the other way is to go on Stoneway, kind of follow Stoneway around, which also goes through a narrow streets and a neighborhood. So I don't think there's anything more that I could add that's already been eloquently stated. Thank you for your time and in considering these objections to this.
Thank you, Mr. Wade. I'm taking it you go Stoneway.
I go Stoneway, exactly. That's right. Yeah, I go Stoneway and to Eola, yes.
Yeah.
But even that is not ideal, and sometimes I have to pull over even if one of the commission, I don't know if any of the commission members are taking that road, but it's not ideal either. But yeah, so adding congestion to that, I don't think is smart. I think pose dangers, yes.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners? Thank you, Mr. Wade. Appreciate your time. And next up we have Sandra Hernandez Lomelli. Name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Sandra and I'm in Ward 5, address 3850 Portland Road. And today I'm here because I would like to, thank Eunice for the time that she has taken to listen to communities across Salem on the project of our Salem. And I'm pleased to know that an equity lens is being used under this 20-year comprehensive plan, which includes a focus on housing. I support much of this plan, especially as it relates to funding and improving multifamily housing throughout Salem and more investments in improving public transportation. I support a comprehensive plan that addresses the lack of low-income housing and not just affordable housing all over Salem. Low-income housing has been mostly kept in Northeast Salem, and I think it would be not just that I think, but based on research and experience, affordable housing and low-income housing would benefit communities across Salem if it were to be spread out a lot more than it is now. For too long, low-income housing, public housing, and affordable housing projects have been heavily focused in Northeast Salem, creating a form of de facto segregation where resources for low-income families and wealthier families do not look the same. This is a condition that also created overcrowding in Northeast public schools, the lack of access to outdoor activities for poor families or working class families of color, and also food deserts in Northeast Salem. So I urge this planning commission to recommend a comprehensive plan that includes low-income housing projects in all of Salem, including South and West Salem. Again, low income and not just affordable housing. I support multifamily housing dwellings be improved and added on the land use plan laid out on Commercial and Edgewater streets or the areas around there, as it has been shown in the maps previously. Adequate funding, including in making public transportation more accessible and improved to reach these areas would make it much easier for families to travel across town. And I think with this 20-year plan, there is enough time to address some of the other concerns that were brought up around access to sidewalks, lighting, and safe routes. I think all of that can be addressed if we work together and if we advocate for funding to go into these areas. So for the past decade, living expenses have exponentially grown while our wages have remained stagnant. So we now have an opportunity to address one of the heaviest burdens for working class families, that being housing. So spreading housing throughout Salem neighborhoods is beneficial to our community members, to our schools and our local businesses, as it has been said before. Today you heard from a lot of young people who have been advocating for more housing. Again, these young people are the future of Salem. They will be the future renters, the future home buyers. And it is important that the city addresses the disparities that we have witnessed and encountered as we have grown up here, especially around access to housing. Thank you for listening, and I hope you take this consideration seriously.
Thank you, Mrs. Hernandez-Lamelli. Any questions from commissioners?
I have one
Commissioner
question, if
Slater.
I could. Do you have any suggestions on language change that we need to include in the Salem plan? I mean, it sounds like you're familiar with the document. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have specific proposals that we can add in there?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the use of the word affordable housing is often being laid out there, and affordable housing is more based on the medium income in the community. But I think that for a majority of community members who are working class in Northeast Salem, affordable housing is often not very affordable. So I think we need to include some of this as public housing projects, as well as low-income housing projects, which would benefit a large portion of the community that I work with and I grew up with.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Thank you very much. Next up is Angelique Prater.
Hi, my name is Angelique and I'm, Hi, my name is Angelique and I'm a community member here in Salem. I come from the flats of West Salem in a low-income family. I've also been a community organizer in the city for around 7 years, working on issues of racial injustice, climate change, and a lot more. I support the Salem vision with some critiques, which I will discuss. Currently, there are various homeowners associations that are demanding that low-income housing is not built in their neighborhoods, instead asking that it all be concentrated in Northeast Salem. It is classist to push all low-income housing into Northeast Salem, as that area of Salem is in the geographical position of enduring environmental racism. Northeast Salem housing is all next to freeways, factories, gas stations, and many other forms of pollution, which South and West Salem are not. Northeast Salem is also over-policed in comparison to South and West Salem, where it is rare to see police patrolling neighborhoods. This is intentional, as Northeast Salem historically houses low-income people of color. I've also heard today that there are people advocating for multifamily housing in West Salem, however, only in areas where there are factories, which is already where all of the poor people that live in West Salem live. After living in West Salem for most of my life, it is an area of Salem that is incredibly segregated. Poor people and people of color live in the flats of West Salem in multifamily housings, while affluent, often white families live in the hills. And so here I ask, why can't low-income people live in South and West Salem in the areas where affluent and white people live? What is wrong with low-income people that makes them not deserving of housing in the same areas of people with higher incomes? It is important to recognize that there is nothing that differentiates low-income people and families from those of higher incomes. The only thing that separates us is prejudice and racism towards poor people and people of color. Low-income housing should be all over Salem, not just concentrated in areas that are already enduring various adversities, and not just in areas where no one else wants to live in. Low-income housing should be in South Salem, West Salem, downtown, and anywhere outside of Northeast Salem. It should be in the hills next to families in the suburbs. It should be by schools. It should be by organic grocery stores. It should be surrounded by nature and parks. Low-income families should be able to experience the exact same things that affluent white families do. I also want to make it clear, as other people have mentioned, that when I talk about low-income housing, I'm not just referring to quote unquote affordable housing. I'm not talking about housing where rent is slightly reduced but still incredibly high. I'm talking about housing where low-income families can comfortably live in. I'm talking about housing where less than half of their income goes to rent, because this is the case for most affluent families. They're not spending 75% of their income on their rent. And the same thing should go for poor people and people of color that are trying to have housing as well. Yeah, that's all my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prater. Questions from commissioners? I'm not seeing any. Thank you for your patience in waiting to testify. Last, but I'll ask for others. Alondra Sanchez.
Hi, my name is Alondra, and I'll be putting the area where I live in the chat. But I live in the northeast area of Salem, and I'm here to support low-income housing developments because it reduces stress and infectious disease, which leads to improvement in both physical and mental health. I think there should be affordable housing in the South and West Salem area. I personally think low-income housing will benefit generations to come in the next 20 years. And this is why I support low-income and public housing all over the Salem area, especially the west and south side of Salem. Also, low-income housing can affect children that are houseless 3 to 4 times more likely to have mental health problems, increasing the risk of severe ill health issues. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions for Ms. Sanchez? I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and Ms. Prater putting your addresses in that chat box would be great. I'm going to go up. I had two that had not shown up yet. Gail Messina, are you here yet?
The two who hadn't joined yet.
Yeah.
They both haven't joined yet. Sorry.
Okay, great. So that concludes the names that I have signed up. Are there any other individuals that we did not get your name on a list and that would like to testify?
I did not admit anyone else who has not already given testimony or is staff.
Great. So we will conclude that end and go to questions of staff. Commissioner Ekus.
Finally unmuted. I think what I want to inquire about and get a better sense of is the chicken and the egg problem, or in this case, the development or the transportation problem. And wonder if perhaps could use the College Park map 170 that we heard about as kind of an example, or something, that context within which to talk about it, because it seems here we have this issue of a rezoning, but as the neighbors were saying, not compatible necessarily with the transportation infrastructure that exists. So what I'm wondering is what would happen if this particular property was developed multifamily, and what the developer would be required to do or might be required to do as far as the any street infrastructure improvements.
Sure. So a lot of our street improvements actually come through the private development as it occurs. And so if there were a development that would be proposed here, there would be street improvements again that come along with that. That's not to say that there isn't larger street improvements that we would make potentially, right, as city funded projects. But the majority of our improvements do come through private development. I don't know if Lisa wants to add anything, but just I wanted to clarify one thing about that property, if that's okay, on College Drive specifically.
Yes.
So that property and that proposal to do multifamily one there came from that church, the property owner there. They are in a public education zone currently where they are not allowed as a standalone church. There used to be a school there, as he's referred to. And so they approached us about doing multifamily there, doing the multifamily one zone not because they want to do multifamily, but because they have long-term plans to do assisted living potentially. And so that was a request that came from them.
It's a good clarification. Commissioner Akers, did you have a follow-up on that? Point?
No, that's an interesting wrinkle to that I wasn't aware of. I'll just say that this seems to be one of the bigger issues, is this the zoning with the anticipation that the transportation improvements more compatible with that zoning or needed by that zoning will come later.
And I see Lisa's got her picture up. So did you want to say something, Lisa?
Hi, thank you.
Oh, actually, hold on, Commissioner Heller, just one second. I was not clear. I meant our planning administrator.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll be right to you.
That's fine.
Sure. I will agree with what Eunice said. Most of the private development does a lot of the street improvements, so for sure they'll do their boundary streets. So those are the streets that their project touches. Depending on the scale of the project, they might have to do a transportation impact analysis that would require additional improvements offsite potentially. It really depends on the scale of the development that's being proposed. As Eunice mentioned, the church, one, wants to be a permitted use, and two, wants to be able to do assisted living in the future. This is our low density multifamily zone that they are proposing or requesting here. People always ask this about development, well, why isn't the street fixed before any development happens? And so that's kind of a backwards way of thinking about it. Like Eunice said, most developments are the ones that do the street improvements because it's required. Yes, sometimes that does lead to piecemeal street improvements, which is not always ideal if you live in that particular neighborhood, but it is a way to get the improvements done at the cost of the developers. Also, any of the land that's being proposed for rezoning, it's not a choice between no development and the zone that we're proposing, right? All of the property has an existing zone today and can be developed under that existing zoning, which might also lead to more traffic. So just because this may be a vacant property or partially developed property, large property with one house, doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a single family subdivision if it's not rezoned to multifamily, for an example. So thank you.
Thank you. And now Commissioner Heller.
Thank you. I had a question about the street improvements as well. Now, when the traffic studies are done, what safety criteria, what kind of, a lot of this is concerning safety issues. So my question is, how is that woven into the private plan? How is that done?
So again, it would be dependent on the specific property, what's being proposed for development, and then what the street system around it is. So Public Works is always looking at safety. We have regulations for driveway placement. And then sometimes we say, well, this is what the code says, this is where you should put your driveway, but that's not safe because it's a curve. So for this development, you have to put your driveway here, or you have to share a driveway, or you need to install a stop sign, etc. So that's always a component when we review a development plan. But we're not reviewing any particular development today. This is just rezoning to allow for future development,
right? Which
then would be left to the private market to develop or not develop.
Thank you. I have one more question, if I may, Madam Chairman.
Yep.
There was a whole lot of written testimony, but no oral testimony about conflicts between the rezoning and Goal 5. And I would, I haven't looked up all of that because it came in so late, but I was wondering if the staff would be kind enough to respond to that in writing so that I can understand the issues there. That's all. That's a request, I guess, more than a.
Yes, we can do that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Goebel.
Thank you. So we had a lot of testimony on affordable housing and the distribution of affordable housing. Eunice, do you want to respond to that, or would it be better if I ask a couple questions specifically?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, feel free.
So as you heard from the testimony tonight, there has been a lot of community input about ensuring that affordable housing, low-income housing, multifamily housing is spread across the community and not just placed in Northeast Salem. And that is what we've tried to do with proposed rezoning of properties to meet our multifamily need. In terms of policies, I did take a look at some of our policies do say affordable housing, so we could tweak the language to be more specific on low-income housing and public housing as was requested. And what, is there another question? Sorry.
Okay, so we can specifically include public low-income housing and the equal distribution of low-income housing throughout the city. Is that?
Yes. Yes. Currently, the language says affordable housing and subsidized housing. We could change that or add to that.
Do we have any mandates at the current moment for subdevelopments or new developments that include any sort of subsidized or affordable housing? None at all?
No, no. There's the possibility that the city could consider that. It's inclusionary zoning, but that's something that we've not done as a city.
Do we know of other cities that have done that successfully?
Portland is the only city I know of that has adopted inclusionary zoning. A couple years ago, maybe, when the state legislation passed and enabling cities to do that. I don't know the outcome of that.
Thank you.
I will say, Commissioner Slater, there's been quite a few articles about the lack of apartments permits that have been submitted since that rule has gone into effect in Portland. So those are rushed to submit, permits right before it went into effect, and then a huge drop off in multifamily permitting in Portland. And we can only require it when there's, 20 units in a building, not a development with 20 units. And so mostly we get 3-story walk up. They don't have 20 units in one building. So if the city were to do it, it would mostly apply to maybe like a downtown type of development. So not to say that it's not worth doing, but there are restrictions on what the state law allows us to do. And the Planning Commission could have a recommendation as part of this project that the city council outside of our Salem look into adopting that. That's something the Planning Commission wants to do.
And if I may ask a follow-up question here.
Yes, you may.
So it sounds to me like you've concluded from Portland's experience that inclusionary zoning mandating some level of low income or affordable housing has driven down the creation of new multifamily housing. Is that?
I will say the Oregonian has concluded.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Numerous articles about it.
But who trusts them?
Yeah, who trusts them?
Okay.
It seems like, the best solution might be if the state law were to change to allow it, not, for a city like Salem, if we could require it on large developments, period, that would be more helpful to us because again, we get a lot of large multifamily developments, but it's not 20 units in one building. So the city council did consider it when the bill was first passed, and they decided that it would have very limited impact. And the type of buildings would be downtown where they're really trying to get more housing, and they didn't want to kind of stifle that at the same time. So they chose not to, but the city could always reconsider that decision.
Is that the case with subdevelopments as well?
I'm not sure what you mean by subdevelopment.
Subdivisions?
Oh,
subdivisions. Thank you.
Oh,
sorry.
No, we can't mandate any sort of price.
Gotcha. Okay.
But we are doing the 15% middle housing in this proposal, so that 15% of all the units in the large subdivisions would have to be set aside for middle housing, which is a way to try to get at some sort of affordability, rental units, et cetera.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Thank you. Commissioner Goebel, you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question? Or?
Yeah, I think similar to what Commissioner Slater addressed, I wanted to just express my utmost appreciation for the community organizers and advocates of affordable housing that took the time out of their evening. And I know that it can be intimidating and emotional to speak at Planning Commission, but I really appreciate you guys all taking the time to advocate for such an important aspect of this proposal, which is advancing and increasing the number of multifamily and low-income housing units available in the city of Salem. And so yeah, I appreciate Eunice and staff speaking to that, and I appreciate all the testimony that we received tonight on that. And I think just, I guess, to go a little further, I would like to hear a little bit more about what staff has considered or looked into as far as expanding multifamily housing in South and West Salem, and to what extent that's been addressed in not just the current proposal, but as this process had gone on, what's been considered and in what ways that's been addressed.
Okay. Other questions? I had a couple of questions, and I know that there is a request to keep the record open. So maybe during that time, answers from staff. I had several questions. One from Mrs. Kometz that lived, Summit and Widgeon, and wanting to know if the city had ever engaged in conversation about buying some of that land for a park-like area. And then thoughts on changing, based on SCAN's request of changing that stretch from Mission to, I believe it was Vista, to MU2 rather than a section of that being MU3. Just what was the thinking about that? Is there any flexibility without jeopardizing the number of units that we're trying to get? Patricia, I see that you are on. Did you want to say something?
Yes, good evening. Patricia Farrell, Parks and Natural Resources Planning Manager. I will take that first question, okay, which was related to the property potentially up for sale or donation as park property. That is in an area where our comprehensive park system master plan shows that we need a neighborhood park. So we are always open to willing sellers or willing donors for parkland. We do have limited resources as far as buying park property, but it is in an area that we do need a neighborhood park. So I'd be happy to talk to the property owner if they are interested.
Great, thank you. So Mrs. Kometz, if you're still on, if you could hook up with the owner with Ms. Farrell, that would be great. Maybe we can continue that conversation. Thank you, Patricia. Question then back to you, Eunice, on that MU2 preference as opposed to MU3 for section of that commercial. Having lived in that area, I don't now, but having lived in that area, I know exactly what she's referring to with that those very not deep lots. But
sure. I just want to quickly add one thing about that property that Patricia just talked about.
Okay.
None of the zoning, if it were to be rezoned, would actually preclude a park from being allowed there. And so parks are allowed in most all of our zones. So I just wanted to put that out there. Anyway, yes, so the mixed use 2 versus the mixed use 3, when we were looking at where to put the mixed use 3 versus the mixed use 2, one of the things, again, we were trying to balance was what is allowed today and how do we make that more pedestrian friendly, which is where we went with the mixed use 3, because it's very much like the zoning that's there today, versus where are we going to go to the mixed use 1 and 2. That is much more restrictive in terms of uses and has higher design standards in terms of real walkability, articulation of buildings, etc. So, we could look at, if the planning commission wanted to, changing that mixed use 3 to the mixed use 2. We would probably want to provide notice to those property owners because the notice they received showed them going to mixed use 3 and, there are implications to what they can do on that property if it were to go to mixed use 2.
And I guess if it had been a testimony from just one individual, but if Roz was representing the neighborhood association, that seems like that's a bigger audience that's interested in that. But I would love to hear thoughts from my colleagues. Commissioner Slater, I bet you have your hand up for something else, don't you?
I do. I just wanted to follow up with Patricia, but I can wait.
Okay, hold on for just a second. So thoughts about that. And I'm not sure if this is how we would start that conversation, Eunice, or do you have suggestions on the best way to approach this? Commissioner Ickes, you've got your hand up. Thank you.
Well, I think you're getting to the question I had, which is on some of these that are very specific to certain properties, what's our plan on how to address those issues that people raised?
Sure. So in your recommendation to council, you could suggest very specific changes. So you could say from this area to this area, we are proposing this change, and then recommending the rest if that's how the planning commission.
So if we kept the record open, Eunice and Lisa, then you would accept suggestions, language changes for, particular cases. Is that what I'm hearing, Lisa?
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the record open. It would be motions. So you need to make a motion during deliberations for each specific change that you're proposing.
Okay.
Or someone's proposing.
Okay, so if we keep the record open, in fairness to my colleagues, if I or anybody else had suggested language change, could we circulate that prior to the meeting so people have time to digest that?
Yes.
Okay.
And you also had a request to continue the hearing. So that's also a possibility. If, for example, the planning commission were to recommend a whole area go to MU2 instead of MU3 after the planning commission made that vote, then we would send notice before the city council hearing, because like Eunice said, it's totally different than the outreach we did with those property owners and impacts their current uses and financing and expanding in the future for those uses. So we would want to provide that, and then they might testify again at council testimony that maybe the planning commission didn't hear tonight.
So maybe when we, well, we're not going to be doing a motion, so under deliberation later we can, but after the next, when it's continued to the next hearing, we can have that conversation. Commissioner Ickes, you're back up.
Yeah, I was just wondering of the extent to which staff would be addressing some of the comments made or some of the specific properties that were mentioned.
We'll be bringing a supplemental staff report to the next meeting. So, Eunice did one that went out on Friday to address comments that were received before then. And then any of the new items that were raised in the testimony, we will address in another report.
Okay, thank you. I do have another issue I want to raise when you get a chance.
I think your hand is still up.
Okay, my issue here relates to the Northeast Salem and some of the issues were raised about the lack of trees. And I know that, and maybe Michael has some perspective on this, because I know he's involved in Friends of Trees, I believe, but there is an effort to plant more trees. Do we have any idea, or do you have any statistics on how many trees are planted in Northeast Salem versus how many trees are planted in other places?
I think Patricia's up for that one, looks like.
Yes, good evening, Patricia Farrell again. Yeah, thank you for that question. We have definitely been focusing a lot of our tree planting efforts in Northeast Salem over the last 9-10 years that we've been working with Friends of Trees and also our own urban forestry staff. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but there is our annual tree report is going to council on March 28th. And that information will be provided in that report, or I can get you the numbers later as well. But yes, we are trying to focus on low canopy areas and getting trees planted in those neighborhoods.
Wonderful. Did you have a follow-up question, Commissioner Eckes?
No, thank you.
Okay. Other conversations, questions of staff at this point? We do have a request, Commissioner Levin, to keep the record open.
I would make a motion that we not keep the record open, but extend the second request that we had.
Continue the hearing.
Continue the hearing. Thank you.
Okay, before I get to you, Commissioner Slater, or unless you're my second.
I'm your second.
Great, Commissioner Slater has seconded. The motion under consideration is to continue the hearing, and seconded by Slater. Conversations on the motion. So this, just clarification, Lisa, this will, people that have testified can testify again, correct?
You could limit testimony to only new folks, or you could just say that testimony is open again for anybody that wants to participate. And since you have asked questions and we are going to do a supplemental, I'd recommend that you just allow open testimony, but it's up to the commission.
Okay. Commissioner
And,
Levin?
I'm sorry, just to clarify, April 5th. So the next council, our planning commission meeting, is that
okay?
That's what intending, Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
So are you good with open testimony? So we'll continue the hearing, open testimony, not limiting the testimony.
I would actually limit the testimony to new or related to questions that were brought up, so that we don't have redundant testimony given that we've already heard. We don't need to have that.
Okay.
We all spend enough of our evenings here that hearing the same thing over again for the purpose of repetition is not beneficial.
Okay, so basically, at least I think we're limiting it to new testimony. Do we have enough down on the record that we need?
Do you have any concerns with the motion or limiting?
Can I clarify something?
Sure. And then we'll go to our counselor.
Well, I was listening to Ian, and there was more than just, it was something about, I mean, not new testimony, but there was something else about questions or responding. I mean, are we prohibiting, for example, people who've already testified from responding to staff's supplemental report?
Let's ask Tom, can you weigh in on that? Give us some direction.
So we can do what Commissioner Levine suggested. However, administratively, that's going to be very difficult because then you're going to have to sort of gatekeep, well, what has somebody said before? Is this something new? Is this whatnot? So my suggestion would be that you open it up to all testimony. And if you are finding that the testimony is being repetitive, you have the authority to put a break on that. And so that the commission's time is not wasted.
Okay.
So if you're in a specific situation where it's just, somebody repeating exactly what they said before, then you can cut them off.
And nicely cut them off.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Yes. I'm really good at that.
That's Shane's job, but I'm good with that.
Okay, so the motion as it stands and is that we are continuing the hearing to April 5th and open testimony. And it was seconded by Slater. Commissioner Slater, are you good with that?
I am.
Okay. So we're discussing the motion. Any more thoughts on that before I have Shelby call the roll? Shelby, would you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion to continue the hearing. Shelby.
Sorry, I thought I hit unmute and it didn't work. Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Ekus?
Aye.
Commissioner Fott?
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
And Commissioner Kopcho is absent.
Thank you. Motion passed. Thank you. Moving on to special orders of business. We don't have any. We don't have any information reports. I do not believe we have any more public signed up for comment. Lisa, your planning administrator's report, please.
Just a reminder that on the 19th, we have the sign code work session coming up. And as we said before, we'll give you a chart of the proposed changes so you can compare those. And I think that's all I have. Yeah.
Okay. Questions of Lisa from the planning commissioners? Seeing none. Commissioners' comments for the good of the order. I'd like to just start commending Commissioner Slater for your article. I thought that was well written and thoughtfully expressed. So kudos.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other comments for the good of the order? Wow, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Go have supper.
Thank you.